بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the Progeny Podcast. I am honored and delighted to have with me a dear brother, a friend, someone who needs no introduction, a student from the Hausa Seminary, and someone who has been serving communities not just across the UK but even around the world. I've had the honor of traveling with him also. My dear friend Sayyid Muhammed Ali Rizvi. Salamun alaikum Sayyidina.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me. Very kind introduction. May Allah bless you. And it's my honor. I've had the honor to travel with you, work with you, and you're a brother, a friend, and a colleague in Tabligh.
Inshallah.
May Allah bless you.
Thank you, Sayyidina. I remember our travels to the US, and Alhamdulillah, had the honor of attending your majlis and benefiting very much, as well as had the honor of working with you through media platforms. I remember the first time we met, and Alhamdulillah, I think it's very important that senior scholars like yourself are involved in media work to propagate the message of the Ahlul Bayt. Especially, I think there are certain topics, as you may know, that sometimes may not be discussed on the pulpit, require workshops or require gatherings outside of the mosque, maybe informal gatherings after the majlis at people's homes.
Right.
I'm sure you're involved in many of these. And there are also media platforms that certain documentaries or shows can be done. And there are podcasts, which I feel, alhamdulillah, we have seen many podcasts. And there are certain topics that we can discuss maybe more freely.
In a different setting.
Alhamdulillah, yeah.
I've heard actually during my travels for majalis and lectures, that sometimes the best tabligh is done off the minbar, sitting with the brothers, sitting with the communities. And podcast is now, it's the new trend, and alhamdulillah, we're using it for one reason and one reason alone, which is the message of Ahlul Bayt, salamullah alayhim ajma'in.
The central point, I think, of the message of the Ahlul Bayt also is the period we're going through now. As you are someone who was in Qom, know that one of our greatest living maraja at the moment, Ayatollah al-Udma Sheikh Wahid al-Khurasani, gives great emphasis on this period, known as the Fatimiya period, where there are different narrations with regards to the Shahada, the martyrdom of Sayyidatu Nisa al-Alameen, as-Sayyida al-Zahra alayha afdal as-salatu was-salam. Before we get into the hopefully the topics and the questions and the issues that hopefully will benefit our viewers and our listeners, why this period, Sayyidina? Why is it not an exact date? We know Shahadat Amir al-Mu'mineen, 21st of Ramadan, Shahadat Imam al-Hasan in the month of Safar, even though some may do 7th, others the end of Safar, Shahadat Imam al-Hussein, 10th of Muharram, and so on and so forth. Whereas you see the Fatimiyya, there's different dates. Why is the date not a date that is known and the whole Shia commemorate one single day?
Established, yes, that's right. So this question of dates has come up many times, and it can also be answered by saying that over time, sometimes dates are lost. If you look at, for example, the dates of the births of some of the A'immah, or the dates of the Shahadat, Imam Rida alayhi salatu wasalam, for example, has 2 to 3 different, there's ikhtilaf on that as well. So it's not just the Shahada of Sayyidah Fatima, even with other A'immah, we have this sort of ikhtilaf. And this is something that has come up in the books of the historians. One historian has narrated this, another historian has given this. Imam Hassan, salamullahi alayhi, you gave the example. Rasulullah, between Sunni and Shia, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, has a
different date.
Ikhtilaf on
Wilada and Shahada.
Wilada and Shahada, of course, the 12th of Rabiul Awwal, the 17th of Rabiul Awwal. So this happens. And same thing with Sayyidah Fatima. Is one reason is that different historians have recorded different dates. Another reason, which is interesting, which some of the ulama narrate, is that because at that time historically there were no dots on the Arabic, and it's either 75 days or 95 days or 40 days.
40 days, that is another narration.
Another
that
narration.
Generally, the Iraqi community take.
So we can say there are three narrations, you could say. The two more popular are the 75 days after the Prophet or the 95 days after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what's interesting is that the Tis'ain and the Sab'ain in the 90 and in the 70, for the 9-5 and the 7-5,
The Arabic.
if you remove the dots, then
the same.
it becomes difficult to tell, right? Is it for example, the Jim or the Ha or the Kha, if there isn't a dot,
Then you
or
can't
the
tell.
Ba, so that was one of the confusions that possibly some of the ulama say may have led to this. Is it Tis'ain, 95? Is it the 70? Is it Sab'ain? So what's happened is that over time, and you mentioned Ayatollah Wahid al-Khurasani, because of his push for Fatimiya, and other ulama, and Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Milani, and Ayatollah Marhum Sheikh Safi Lutfullah Gul Paygani, Marhum, they used to say Fatimiya itself is Ashura. Join them,
Yeah.
the
that's
two
what's happened.
dates,
Yeah.
bring them together and make this a period of mourning. And so now, alhamdulillah, you observe that this is, in the last 30 years, if you ask your elders, ask my parents, your parents, it wasn't observed as one total period of Fatimiya mourning period. It was the day of the istishhad or that day or that night of istishhad. But now, because of the push from our maraja, ulama, it has become a period of mourning, and we respect that. Whether it's that date or that date, what's important is that this period is respected for the martyrdom of
from
the
the
lady.
13th of the Jamad al-Awwal up until the 3rd of
third.
Jamad al-Thani, so a period of nearly 20 days, just over 20 days, depending on how long the month is.
Right.
There's this mourning period of Fatimiyya, and I've, as you mentioned, I've seen now it's become joint, where there are continuous majalis. I'm sure you're also delivering majalis during that whole period, where it's known as the Fatimiyya.
And she deserves it. The lady of light,
Ahsantum.
she deserves it.
I think it's from the wisdom of Allah.
Subhanallah.
There's wisdom in it that the date is not known, so it becomes a period where we
Neither
are
is her
mourning and
qabr.
remembering, and neither is her qabr, and that's why I think you also know this better than me, that Sayyida Zahra is compared to Laylatul Qadr,
Subhanallah.
the hidden grave, the hidden date of her shahada, and the mystery. I call it a mystery. Not that I feel it's a mystery, but some may consider it a mystery over her, the circumstances of her shahada. You mentioned 75 and 95 to make it clear what we mean here. 75 days after the demise, the martyrdom of Rasulullah, or 95 days after the demise of Rasulullah, or 40 days after the demise of Rasulullah. Either way, it's a very short period. I think
indeed.
even in Sunni literature, they say 6 months after
Yes.
the
Passing of the Prophet.
passing of the Prophet. Either way, it's a very short period for someone aged
And
18.
it begs the question, why?
Why?
What happened?
And this is why I said it's a mystery to some, not obviously to those with the aqidah and from the theology perspective of the Ahlul Bayt. And before I get into the details, Sayyidina, and inshallah we can try and benefit from this during this period to try and reignite our understanding, even though it's very difficult, of Sayyida Zahra, because she is known as Fatima al-Khalq min. The khalq, the creation, does not really comprehend
معرفتها.
and understand her ma'rifah, her recognition. But we'll try our best, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Has her shahada, the tragedy of Fatimiyya, been exaggerated over the last few years? And from your own research, especially when you're preparing for majalis and you're going through the masa'ib and through the incidents of the duel, is there an exaggeration?
That's an excellent question, and we get this question posed a lot, more and more in the recent years. That wasn't the case. If you speak with the elders, some of the questions that are now posed in regards to Fatimiyya and her tragedy and Masa'ib and her lamenting were not there before.
Why do you think that is, by the way, Sayyidina? That's quite interesting that now there's more questions, but if you say some to an older person who maybe lived in the 60s, 70s during Fatimiya, and you question, for example, any of the incidents, the door or the broken rib, they may laugh. They call it badihiyya. This is something that's known. Why are you even asking me about this? Why is now all of a sudden these questions arising?
Can I be open?
Yeah, of course. This is the whole point of the podcast, inshallah.
It could be a number of reasons, but the reason that I feel is probably the primary reason is Sunni infiltration through different channels.
Okay.
Sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly.
Okay, interesting.
And it's a of course it's a difficult topic to discuss, but we can't ignore that there definitely is infiltration from those who are from outside of our madhab or coming into madhab with their ideas or injecting ideas. And hence for this reason we find that some of the questions that are being posed are not there for learning, they're there to weaken, to try to create doubt in the minds of the mu'mineen, the everyday Shia, the lovers of Sayyidah Fatima, that, well, maybe that is exaggerated. How do you really know? Did Medina even have doors? How do we know how many ribs were broken? Unfortunately, these are the sort of questions that are being how do you know? Were you there? So, is infiltration, number one. Number two is lack of awareness, lack of knowledge, and sometimes certain speakers are not, who are not, it's not their space, it's not their place to speak in this, to try to come and speak on the, sometimes manabir, sometimes online, on lectures, or whatever, on their channels, to try to weaken the tragedy of Sayyidah Fatima. My question is, what are you getting out of it? Are you pleasing Sayyidah Fatima? What is this a struggle for Allah's sake? What is your end goal? What is your point? I remember once, just on a side note, one of my teachers in Qom, somebody had come out and said at that time that we don't know if Sayyidah Fatima, there's a tradition that when she was in the kafan, and then Imam Hussein embraces her, and she embraces him back. And there are certain narrations, other narrations, and somebody came out and said, look, there's no sanad for this, there is no chain for this, there is no evidence for this. And one of our teachers said, well, the person who said that, he's somebody who's a student of talib al-ilm, a student of knowledge of the deen. It's his job to go and find the sanad. It's his job to go and look for it. His job is not to weaken the religion. If there isn't one, then go and research it. Go and find it. It's something that has been established for over the years, the tragedy of Sayyidah Fatima. If now there are certain things that you may think that you can't find, just because you can't find it doesn't mean it's not there. As somebody, and a historian, there's a rule in history, it's called the golden rule, which is that the absence of proof is not proof of absence. So if something isn't there straight away, it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. So we shouldn't reach the level of denial that it's, it's weak or it's not there. So we completely deny it. We don't know that.
But coming back to this question of exaggeration.
Exaggeration, yes.
With the musibah itself.
Are we exaggerating? That's the question.
Yeah.
For that, we need to go back to the sources. We as the Shia, our Sheikh of the Sheikh al-Ta'ifa is who? At-Tusi, Sheikh al-Tusi. Sheikh al-Tusi, rahimahullah, gives a consensus in his book Kitab al-Shafi, that there is a consensus of the Shia where they unanimously agree, and it's very explicit. This is Tusi going back 1,000 years, not 200 years or 150 years or 70 years back, 1,000 years back. At-Tusi says there is a consensus on a number of things: the burning of the door, the beating of hitting Sayyidah Fatima, salamullahi alayha, and the miscarriage of Al-Muhsin. It's very explicit, just these three things. Ignore the others for a minute. But these three things come with detail themselves, Burning of the door, that has details, that has a context. Hitting her, that has a context. The miscarriage of Muhsin, that itself has a context. What else do we narrate on the manabir? What else do we say in the majalis?
I think it's important you mentioned Shaykh al-Ta'ifa al-Tusi, ala Allah maqama. And a point I'd also like to raise when it comes to the point about, for example, we don't have this hadith, or this hadith doesn't have a chain. I think it's important to mention when Shaykh al-Tusi mentions this, something we tend to forget is maybe he had evidence or a hadith in his hand available to him, which is not available to us today.
Sent. Very good
This
point.
is very important because how many Shia books were thrown in Dijla and Furat? How many libraries were burnt?
The ink of the books changed the color
Changed
of
the
Furat.
color of the Furat. So sometimes just because it's not there today,
Ahsan.
it doesn't mean someone like Sheikh al-Tusi, who was very precise and daqiq, as they say in Arabic, he's very precise in what he says.
Yeah.
He's not going to come and say this definitely happened if he hasn't seen evidence for it. But
Student of Mufid. He's not somebody small.
talking of Sheikh al-Mufid, now that you mentioned him, some people come forward and say, but Sheikh al-Mufid denied what took place. You just mentioned Sheikh al-Tusi.
Yeah.
What do we say to those that have not read all the works of Sheikh al-Mufid
Sheikh al-Mufid, yes.
and
So-
say that he's denied the attack on the house, and he's denied, for example, even mentioning Muhsin? And therefore, if Sheikh al-Mufid, who's the teacher of Sheikh al-Tusi, has denied this 1,000 years ago, must be some exaggeration.
The fact that Sheikh al-Tusi, who's his student, is saying that there's a consensus,
Ijma'.
ijma on the matter, tells you he's getting it from somewhere. You know, he's a student of Sheikh Mufid, he's trained by Sheikh Mufid, he has been fed that knowledge by Sheikh Mufid. So he's getting it from somewhere, number one. And number two, would he really make such a claim if his own teacher was breaking, if you like, the consensus? You know, it's a big thing to break a consensus. It's ijma. Nobody is opposing that. Nobody's gone against it. Everybody within the Shia faith agrees on one certain thing. And then to come out and to make a statement about it, if you know your teacher breaks that, then Sheikh Tusi, why would he do that?
He wouldn't use the word ijma'.
He wouldn't
He
use
would
that
say
word.
this
If his
ijma'.
own ustad, his own teacher denied. Number one. Number two, he doesn't deny that. Who said he denies that? If he hasn't, you know, if he hasn't affirmed something, that's not denial. To deny is to outright deny. In fact, Sheikh al-Mufid in Kitab al-Irshad, and by the way, just to give a bit of background, Kitab al-Irshad, go back to that era of Abbasid, Baghdad, Iraq, Sunni dominance, that time where Sheikh Mufid used to live, by the way. The Buyyids were in power, had just come into power, but the Sunnis were still dominant. The Abbasids still had control over Baghdad. It was a time where every year on Ghadir and Ashura there used to be clashes in the city because of sectarianism. One of the years in the time of Sheikh Mufid, a certain area, neighborhood of Baghdad was burnt, which led to the death of 18,000 Shia, women, children, vulnerable men, young. According to Ibn Khaldun, the historian, 20,000 above. I mean, that itself is a genocide in itself. To target a specific area, a specific neighborhood, because of the belief of a specific people. At a time like that, Sheikh Mufid is writing Al-Irshad. So you could expect him that he's going to be a little bit clever. He's going to be a little bit reserved, just to try to save, not put fuel on fire, as they say. Even despite that, subhanAllah, look how wise he is. He left behind a masterpiece where he says what? There is a sect amongst the Shia. Look how he puts it. And you can find this in his, I'm quoting this. Irshad. There's a sect amongst the Shia who believe that Fatima had a child that she miscarried at a young age and that she died young. This says a lot in it. A child was miscarried at a young age. Now the question that prompts up is, what led to that? What happened? Number one. The other point is that Kitab al-Irshad was written for the masses. It was not something for the Sunnis, it was not something for the Shias alone. It was both for Sunni, everybody.
It's not khas for the
It wasn't khas. It was for the Aam. It was for everybody. But the same Mufid in the other book, his other books that he have, his other works that he has, he is open about the istishhad of Sayyidah Fatima.
I think it's very important you mentioned something that a lot of people forget when reading works on historical events and hadiths of the Imams. The word context, it's very important. And that's why, for example, the best tafasir have after every verse that they're explaining, the word sabab al-nuzul,
Yes.
the reason for revelation. Certain verses were revealed because of a certain incident that took place, and then therefore that verse was revealed. For example, Ya ayyuha rasul balligh ma unzila ilayk. The sabab is ghadir.
Yeah.
For example, context is very important, I think, when we look at hadith and when we look at historical works. Who's the imam speaking to, for example, or in this case, who is Shaykh al-Mufid addressing? With regards to hadiths of the Imams, alayhim, for example, people come forward and say, why didn't Imam al-Sadiq or Imam al-Baqir or later on al-Kadhim or al-Rida, alayhim, afdal salatu wasalam, go into details? We don't have a hadith where the Imam, for example, gives you a full details of the broken rib and the doom. Who's the Imam speaking to? The environment of the Imam. How do we know the Imam's even safe to speak openly? Because sometimes even some of the hadiths that, for example, contradict other hadiths with regards to fiqh issues, we come forward and say the Imam said this out of taqiyya. The Imam said this, for example, because he was in the presence of the Abbasid soldiers or Abbasid Caliph.
Sometimes there was a spy in the room.
Ahsantum Sayyidina. I think, again, my advice to, and I'm no person to give advice, the advice is for myself before anyone, is to, when we read, is always to research more, go into in-depth research on why the Imam said this or why Shaykh al-Mufid. Now, a lot of people, I can guarantee you, majority of people will not know about the 20,000 Shias being killed, as you mentioned, Ibn Khaldun mentions. At the same time, al-Mufid was writing al-Irshad.
What's interesting is that in all of al-Irshad, Kitab al-Irshad, he totally skips Saqifa. Now, are you telling me he didn't believe that Saqifa happened and then the Khilafah was taken, the haqq of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the haqq of Sayyid Fat? Of course not. He's a Shia. He believes in all of that.
Shia and Sunni aslan.
He hasn't included Saqifa in his kitab. That shows you that the book was not meant for the Shias alone, but his private majalis, his tone is different. Kitab al-Ikhtisas, for example, his other work, Kitab al-Masail, he speaks of the burning of the door. He speaks of the beating of Sayyidah Fatima, hitting her. He speaks of whipping Sayyidah Fatima. He speaks about the miscarried child, Al-Muhsin, salamullahi alayh. He goes in the detail because that book was written for the Shia. Shaykh al-Tusi, on the other hand, who comes right after him, is explicit because most of his works, Al-Amali, his other books, the book Correction of Beliefs, these books are written directly for the Shia. And you see there's a change of tone. The books that are for the Shia, they're explicit. The books that are for the masses to be distributed out, they're more reserved. So they're more, They're smart in a way. They're clever in a way.
There's wisdom behind it.
There's wisdom behind it. When Shaykh al-Tusi says there is a sect within the Shia that believes Sayyidah Fatima's martyrdom, that believes in Al-Muhsin's miscarriage, that believes in burning of the door. What he means is that the sect within the Shia is actually the 12 Shia, because the Zaydis were Shia, the others are Shia. Yeah. There were other sects of Firq al-Shia. The book Firq al-Shia deals with many sects. At that time, there were many Shias. So Shaykh Mufid, very cleverly, he says, one sect amongst them, referring to himself, the Imami, Ithna Ashari, believes in the istishhad of Sayyidah Fatima. But yes, he's more explicit in Shia majalis, in Shia gatherings.
I want to go into Kitab Sulaim, but before I do that, and before looking at the, we've touched on hadith and narrations, some come forward and say, and again, I'm speaking not just those from the other schools of faith, the non-Shias, the Am, but also within the Shia school, that the bravest, most courageous person after the Prophet, unanimously, is Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. How can someone who is so brave and courageous and was known for his valor allow this to take place against his beloved wife? Where's the protection for a Sayyidah Zahra? They say, okay, the hadiths are there, we'll agree with you. What do we say to that? What's the response, Sayyid, when it comes to questioning Imam Ali's lack of protection, as they put it, for a Sayyidah Zahra?
The Imam Ali, alayhi salatu wasalam, he was a very, very Many answers have been given by ulama, historians. I'll give one or two short and because it's one of the questions that is posed every year on Fatimiya, again from the opposition who oppose the narration or the narrative that her door was burned and she was attacked and she was between the door and the wall. Number one, he was the most bravest. Absolutely, there is no doubt about that. But at the same time, he's also the most muti' to Rasulullah. He's also the most obedient to the Prophet. He's also the most patient when it comes to reserving his strength for another time. The ulama of akhlaq say you can't be brave if you're not patient. And if you're not patient, you're not brave. In other words, they're two sides of the same coin. The most shaja' is also has the most sabr. And hence you find Ali ibn Abi Talib, when he takes down Amr ibn Wad in Khandaq, he sits on his chest, but then he gets off. At a time where he's ready to, where you finish your opponent. He walks away, he comes back. You know Khandaq, right? Ali ibn Abi Talib had a wasiyah from Rasulullah telling him, commanding him exactly, after me, this will happen to your house. You have to be patient, number one. Number two, oh Ali, if you do not find enough supporters, preserve the life of the qalil mu'minin, the few remaining believers, preserve their lives. Do not touch the sword. Number three, you may know a scholar from Najaf, Sheikh Ahmed Salman al-Tunisi. He's very popular right now. His work is amazing. He's a muhaqqiq at the same time, a speaker, a khatib as well. He gave a very good an answer to this. I was listening to him. I think it may have been on another podcast actually, where he said that, who said to you Amir al-Mu'minin was not at the door? He says Amir al-Mu'minin his house had two doors. Ali was at one door, Fatima was on the other door. Because Ali had two doors. One to the masjid, one towards the street. And his house was surrounded.
This is well known, yes.
His house was surrounded from the outside, from the inner part, the sahn of the masjid, the inside. So he says, what guaranteed you, who said to you Ali is sitting inside? It's possible that Ali was holding back one door, and so the Fatima was holding back the other door. Unless you have evidence to deny that, one cannot deny that. That was an eye-opener for me. I was like, I never thought of that. I always think of one door.
And we always know, and we know it's well known that there's two doors, because there's the door facing the masjid, because all the doors were closed except the door of Ali and Fatima. We forget that. We all know it.
That's right.
SubhanAllah, what an eye-opener it is that.
Hadith, Saddul Abwab. Close the doors, illa bab Ali, except the door of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So this was an eye-opener for me as well. And finally, it happened. What happened? It happened so quick that it's not that Amir al-Mu'minin stood there, watched it. The narration says he actually grabbed, and he threw him to the ground. He was bleeding out of his nose, and Ali puts his knee on his neck, and he takes a sword to his neck, and he says, "Had it not been for the wasiyah of Rasulullah, you," and then he points at those there were some narrations say 40 men. Kitab Sulaim, for example, some of the narrations say 40 odd men were standing by the door side. He says, "You or them, they are nothing for the Dhul Fiqar of Ali ibn Abi Talib." In other words, Ali can finish them. You know that. But it's because of the wasiyah. Ali is muti to the Prophet. He's not going to disobey the Prophet. These guys are, Ali fought at Khaybar, at Khandaq, at Hunayn. These guys are nothing.
And this is bravery. Bravery with patience.
This is real bravery. Not that, the other type, what they refer to, the opposition, that's not a brave person. That's just a hothead.
And anger, maybe.
Yeah, a hot-headed person.
Yes.
No control. Lack of self-control. No control of the nafs. Remember, shaja'a and sabr is a sifa of the nafs.
Ahsant.
Not of the jism. It's not the muscle or the gym or the exercise. It's of the nafs. Ali ibn Abi Talib is nafsun nabi sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi.
Amir al-Mu'minin Salamullah alayhi, I don't think anyone can question his bravery, but I think you touched on a very important point, and that is sabr and shaja'a come hand in hand. And I think beautifully you also mentioned the point that we all know about the two doors, but it's something that maybe we haven't thought about. When it comes to Sayyidina, coming back to the actual what took place. Before I go into Kitab Sulaim, which is something that is raised again a lot, not just during Fatimiya, you personally, and I'm going to be a bit personal by asking you this, when you go through the Masa'ib, or when you go through your lecture series and you're picking a historical topic about the incident, whether it's from Saqifa, whether it's from before the Raziyatul Khamis, whether it's the attack on the door, do you mention names? And what's your opinion on this? Considering that I think we also live in a global village right now, where one thing that can be said in London will be heard in LA, and one thing that can be said in New York will be heard in Karachi, and one thing that is taught in Najaf will be heard in Sydney, Australia. So
Yeah.
how do you go about that?
So the question caught me off guard. Personally, on a personal level, when I am on the minbar, I'm reciting majalis, and I come to the specifics and the details of the masa'ib of the Lady of Light. Usually, I do not mention names. The reason for that could possibly be that I never heard my teachers mention names. And you know, teachers have an impact on students. طلاب العلم, the ustadh, the muallim, the sheikh, the sayyid that you study under, or ulama, you have an impact. They have an impact on you. You take from them. So generally, I think that is one of the reasons that I don't, because I haven't heard from the elders, from the seniors, mention names too much. Second point, however, is that in certain contexts, in certain environments, especially in the sort of dynamics that we are living in, I also believe that in certain settings, it's okay to have difficult conversations. Respectfully. I mean, we can respectfully discuss difficult points, difficult details, certain dark chapters of Islamic history. What happened to the lady Fatima? What happened to Fatima? What happened to Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen? What happened on the day of Ashura? Who were they? So I think in an academic context, it's fine to mention names. I don't have an opinion on it, but generally speaking, usually the scholars refrain from the first three names, and then thereon. I follow the context of Ziyarat Ashura.
Yeah.
What the Holy Imam says in there, I try to make that as my measure, my scale. I think I asked this question once in London, actually, when one of the Maraja of Najaf, Sheikh Ishaq Fayyaz of Najaf, came to London a few years back for treatment. And I went and met him in Harrow with some of the other ulama. Some of the contemporary scholars were alongside us that we see and hear in and around London. And I asked the question in regards to mentioning names. He didn't prohibit, he didn't stop, but he did say, as for Muawiyah and after, there's no choice. Mention their names. I guess the first three, you got to be a bit careful where you are and how you're going, where the lecture is going to be conducted and how it will reach the masses. But thereafter, so that reminds me of the scale that is in Ziyarat Ashura, how the Holy Imam curses the first, second, third, Muawiyah, Yazid, and Shimar, and others, and others, and others. So I usually use that as a scale of measure for the minbar.
Coming back to the main part, I think, for what took place, a lot of it is mentioned in Kitab Sulaym ibn Qais. And many come forward and say this is not a reliable source when it comes to taking historical events. What would you respond, and what's your opinion from your scholars, your teachers, when it comes to this book? Is it considered a book that is reliable when mentioning what took place with the Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam?
Salamullahi alayha. The question of Kitab al-Sulaym has become a highly controversial one, to the extent that if you recite a narration from it of Musibah, because it contains a lot of details of the masa'ib, of what took place, would say the Fatima, from the burning of the door to entering the house, to her being crushed between the door and the wall, to at least 3 men hitting her, if not more, with different things, whips, sword, sheath of the sword, hand, the eye becoming red as a result of the slap, the earring falling, Muhsin, and a lot more. Because the question of this book has become so controversial, straight away a lot of people put a question mark on it. Where did you get this from? Kitab al-Sulaym. That's not authentic. Baba, who said it's not authentic? What reason do you genuinely have to say that that book is not authentic? That book is not sahih. It contains traditions in it that are against the beliefs of the Shia. There's this tradition there's a tradition of the 13 Imam tradition in Kitab al-Sulaym. No book is authentic except the Quran. If that is what you're saying, that this book is not authentic, it contains this, there is ishkal here, ishkal. There's ishkal in every book. The greatest book, Al-Kafi, when it comes to Shia literature, Hadith corpus, is Al-Kafi. There is ishkal in that. There are narrations in that are against the Shia faith. There are narrations in that are da'if. There are narrations in that are rejected by ulama. So no book except the Holy Quran is authentic, sahih, 100% cover to cover. Even Nahj al-Balagha. We can't say with certainty that every word uttered in this book is directly from the tongue of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Can't say that nobody can say that with 100% yaqeen. Not even Sayyid al-Radhi, who compiled this. Neither does he make that claim. So, it's not an authentic book. Yes, no book is 100% authentic. Yes, there may be ishgal in it. The opinions of the ulama. Sayyid al-Khu'i, a giant of ilm al-rijal, his encyclopedia, the Mu'jam of Rijal al-Hadith, speaks for itself, speaks volumes, and it is in volumes. When he comes to discuss Sulaym bin Qais, this person, straight away he does tawthiq. Thiqatun, Azim al-Shan, Jalil al-Qadr, highly praised Sulaym. Then the Kitab al-Sulaym exists as one of our major pieces of work for hadith, for aqaid, for tarikh. Sayyid al-Khu'i. Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Milani, Hafidhahullah in Qum, who's known for his work in kalam and hadith. He's a muhaqqiq, he's known for his tahqiq on a lot of topics, a lot of chapters of fiqh, hadith, tarikh, and aqaid. They asked him the question of the sanad of this book, because they say the sanad is weak. He says, my fatwa is the sanad is mu'tabar. And it's on his official website. He says this book and its sanad for me is mu'tabar. He accepts the sanad of the book. So Sayyid al-Khu'i then says, even if there's an interesting point here, even if there are certain narrations in this book that may be weak or may not pass the test of ilm al-rijal, that is not enough to discredit the whole book. And what's even more interesting is that the narrations that are found in this book are found in other books.
Yeah.
If you want to say, okay, I just totally want to close my eyes from Kitab al-Sulaym, fine, close your eyes. But they're found in other books. Books of Sheikh al-Tusi, books of Al-Mufid, books of Sheikh Kashif al-Ghita, Bihar al-Anwar, Al-Majlisi, and many others. Sharh Nahj al-Balagha ibn Abil Hadid al-Mu'tazili, Sunni, Mu'tazili alim. He records the same detail in his sharh that you find in Kitab al-Sulaym.
I think it's important you mentioned this authentic book is only Quran, and the fact that nothing else in our works we can say is from cover to cover and authentic, because it's a collection of hadiths, and then the scholars come forward and look at the sanad and look at the rijal in the hadith, the narrators of the hadith and the chain of the narration, and then they look at the matin, the actual hadith, and then look at have a linguistic analysis of the terms, the Arabic terms that are used, and go into details to verify. And this is also something that I've noticed, where people maybe claim a hadith is weak or a book is weak without really understanding ilm al-rijal or understanding how a scholar comes to an opinion that this hadith is weak. What's hadith maybe in an opinion of one scholar, and with another scholar's scale, it's authentic. Someone, a rijali, a narrator of a hadith considered in by one scholar of ilm al-rijal being not authentic, with another scholar he is authentic. So there are different variations. There isn't a clear cut this hadith. There's research that's done, and I think sometimes this is again a point that I want to emphasize on, is the fact that there's actual research. When Sayyid al-Khu'i says this Sulaym is someone that is rajul thiqa, someone that is trustworthy, someone that has great status in the eyes of the Ahlul Bayt. This comes with 70 years of research, not someone who's just maybe watched a 5 minutes clip. Again, I'm not discrediting anyone for watching 5 minutes clips. Nowadays, people look for those.
It's shorter than 5 minutes.
It's shorter than 5
seconds.
minutes. But what I'm saying is sometimes you need to research and have true bahath and dalil. As the scholars always remind me, نحن أصحاب الدليل. We are people that follow dalil. أينما يميل نميل. Wherever evidence and proof takes us, we'll go with the proof. Where hadith takes me towards that truth, I will go towards it. So I think I don't want to discourage people from obviously watching the short clips, the reels, but you have to ask yourself, do I know enough before I come forward and speak? And as you mentioned, Kitab Sulaym goes into details. From the details, that if we were to put a order to what took place, what actually did take place from your research and from what Kitab Sulaym, because we mentioned it, says, what actually did take place when it comes to the Shahada of Sayyida Zahra?
Salamullahi alayha. Kitab al-Sulaym, one of its characteristics is that the detail it gives, how explicit it is. Of course, Sulaym is min ashab Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. This is al-Ghadairi, and is a Rijal, Kitab al-Rijal. He considers him amongst the awliya of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam, amongst his close friends. And he's somebody who saw up to the time of Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam. So Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, Imam Sajjad, 4 Imams were contemporary to his time. So he's somebody who's a very reliable person, a pious person, close to the Imams, close to the Shia. And he narrates this through Aban ibn Abi Ayyash. What happened to the Lady of Light. And these are, of course, all words of Masai. But I want to just quickly, because it's sad, it's difficult to narrate the details.
Of course.
But he includes details like the Lady of Light, Fatima Zahra, her house being surrounded by 40 plus men, threatened to burn the door down unless the door is opened. Sayyidah Fatima is on the other side, and the second caliph is on the other side. Somebody tells him that the lady is in the house. Qala wa in, he says, so what if she's in the house? This is also in other books, by the way. It's not something specific to this book. So these narrations are also found in other books. Bukhari, for example, which is the most authentic and most major for the Sunni Muslims, clearly states that she did not speak with him hatta matat, until she died. So for those who try to join the ends at the end, no, they made up, and there was
She was angered.
She was angered, but then they made up. It was cleared, they apologized, and the case was closed. No, Bukhari says until she died, she refused to talk to them. Why? Bukhari doesn't give you the details. For that, you come to Kitab al-Sulaym. The burning of the door, and it's not just the burning of the door, it's the fact that it is the daughter of the Prophet, and first the door is kicked. And then the narrations say the Fatima is kicked. And she's carrying Muhsin. So these are the sort of gruesome details. And the second caliph writes a letter to Muawiyah in which he gives the details of what he does, which is in other books outside of Kitab al-Sulaym, where he explains the same thing. But Kitab al-Sulaym goes into more details. the narration that in Kitab al-Sulaym, Imam Hassan would refuse to look at them, Ash-Shaykhain, the two. And they asked him, why do you do that? He says, because whenever I see them, it reminds me of what they did to my mother. And that he would cry. It gives details that somebody slaps her, somebody hits her with a whip, somebody kicks her, the Holy Lady, Salamullahi alayha. And despite that, she does not let go of Imam Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wasalam. When they finally drag him out with the rope in his neck, she comes again. She gets up from the ground, she comes and she holds Imam Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam. The point is what? To get into the house, take Ali to the mosque. To get him to give bay'ah. In reality, they were not there for Fatima. Fatima stood as a defender of wilayah of Imam Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam. Had she not stepped in the way, they would have taken Imam Ali alayhi salam. But she stood as the first defender, muhafidha, shaheeda, for the wilayah of Imam Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam. And for this reason, they did to her what they did to her. But it shows you the audacity. Could you imagine Fatima, for those who say, why did Fatima come to the door? Why did Imam Ali let Fatima come to the door? Why did Ali ibn Abi Talib himself not come to the door? If Fatima had not come to the door that day, the hypocrisy would have not been exposed. They would have turned around and said, well, look, Ali is a man of war. He's a man of battle. He tried to attack us. We saved ourselves. We had to attack him back. But this is not something they could ever say about Lady Fatima. Because they know the Lady of Light. They can never say, a lady tried to attack us and we only tried to save ourselves, we tried to save our... No. The fact that Fatima was there puts a nail in the coffin forever until the Yawm al-Qiyamah. That Fatima was on haqq and those who opposed her were upon batil.
I started this conversation by mentioning the fact that we have different narrations to the date of the martyrdom and the fact that this period now is known as the Fatimiya period. How is the commemorations of Fatimiya essential when it comes to Shia belief? And how important are these commemorations and the majalis that are taking place around the world?
Just as important as Sayyidah Fatima is in Ayatul Tathir, in Hadith al-Kisa, Fatimatu wa abuha wa ba'luha wa banuha. She is the center of Tashayyu. She is the center of Shiaism. She is the center of she is the core of our belief, Sayyidah Fatima. Everything spins around her. Rasulullah, her father. Hassan and Hussein, her sons. Ali ibn Abi Talib, her husband. It spins. Mubahila, she's in the middle. Everything spins around Fatima. And hence the Prophet doesn't say the one who angers me angers Allah. He says the one who angers her angers me. And the one who angers me angers Allah. In other words, the core of your belief, your roots have to be attached with Sayyidah Fatima. Shaykh al-Tusi, in his book Correction of Beliefs, he says, look, there are certain historical things that you have to believe in them. It's not that, some people say, well, how does it make a difference to my iman? Yeah. It's just a historical... Okay, it happened. What is it giving me today?
What's it changing in my life?
People always want something. They don't want to give something. What is it giving me today? What the question is not that what it's giving you today. The question is that, what are you doing? They say, don't ask what your country can do for you, but rather what you can do for your country. Don't ask what your religion can give you, but rather what you can give to your religion. My love for Sayyidah Fatima. Aya mawaddah. Illa al-mawaddata fil qurba. She's part and parcel of that. Is she not? Sunni or Shia Mufassirin? She's part and parcel of that. So now, one cannot love her and love her enemy. Certain historical events form a part of your belief, your aqaid. One cannot, in that case, if history is not important, those who try to downplay history, if history is not important, let's ignore Ghadir. It's just a historical event. The Prophet stopped and raised somebody's hand and said what he said and he moved on.
Like the rest of the Muslims moved on, let's move on.
Let's move on, yeah. But Ghadir became the core of the aqidah of haqq and batil.
And Fatima understood this.
She's the first shaheeda of Ghadir.
That's why, she understood this.
Ahsantum, ahsan. Yeah. She was the first one to stand up for wilayah. That's how important the wilayah of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib was. It's not that she didn't do it for fadak. As sometimes people say, was it a land grab issue?
Talking of Fadak, that's another episode, I think, just on that sermon.
Just another topic. But the point is that Sayyidah Fatima is not doing it for the Fadak, or she's doing it for the haqq of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam. One cannot be a Shia without the tragedy of Sayyidah Fatima.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something important as the hubb of Sayyidah Zahra that one must hold on to. There was a recent clip of one of the great ulama and scholars in Najaf by the name of Sheikh Baqir al-Irawani. I'm sure you've seen it, which he mentions that when Munkar and Nakir, after I leave this world, come to me and ask me, what do you have to offer as your amal, as your deed? And he says about himself, he says, do you think I'm going to mention my lessons, or I'll mention my books? Sayyidina, that he's durus tamhidiyya and fiqh al-istidlali and ilm al-rijal and so on and so forth, are being taught today in the hawza. He says, do you think I'm going to mention my books, or I'm going to mention my lessons, or he says, no, I'm going to mention one thing. Hubbi li Fatima.
Subhanallah.
My love for Sayyidah Zahra, for Fatima Zahra.
Subhanallah.
So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that at least we can be of those that have this love.
That's all we have.
Yeah.
The book of deeds is empty. It's no good. And that's what Ayatollah Wahid says as well, actually, in one of his, every year before Muharram, to his students, the Bahth al-Kharij, he gives a durus for the preparation of Muharram. And he says, on the day of Qiyamah, we have nothing in the book of deeds. We will say to Allah, oh Allah, only one thing, Hubb al-Husayn.
That's all for that.
That's all we have. Yeah.
Thank you, Sayyidina, for
Habibi. Thank you for having me.
For this very intriguing and interesting, and I hope it removes the doubt that there is. And if not, I hope it encourages those to read up more.
This is just a scratch on the surface. There's a lot more that can be said. There's a lot more digging that can be done. We don't have the time, and certain things required for the reader to read rather than...
But what you said, more things to be said. That means we'll do another, inshallah, hopefully another episode with Sayyid Muhammad Rizvi. Thank you for your time, and thank you for watching, and hopefully we'll see you all very soon. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.